Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Cosmic Cafe, the companion interview podcast for thecosmiccircus.com. I'm Ayla Ruby, and today we have a special musically inclined guest. Stefan Smith composed the score for Batman, The Doom That Came to Gotham, and also the latest PBS Super Y's comic book adventures. This was a fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy. Well, thank you for doing this. I'm really excited to talk.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited as well.
Okay, so I guess I'll just jump into this. Um, so let's talk about Super Y. So like we are very familiar with this in my house because I have a young daughter, so this is like perfect.
Oh, awesome.
Um, how did you get onto this project? Can you talk about that?
It's actually pretty funny. So there was a lady that I knew through a connection that paired me up with Nine Story. She was friends with one of the producers there, and they actually sent the prompt over. And I'm more of a fan of like action movies and things like that, and so that's kind of like what I like to score. And so she's like, it's a children's series for PBS Kids, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do Barney and Friends, but it looked like a cool project. And once I talked to them and just their musical approach of what they wanted to do, like 70s cop show funk mixed in with all different types of elements and musical styles, I was like, one, this will be a great way for me to hone my craft for songwriting, but also with all different types of styles. So it kind of, I submitted a demo where I sang and I worked with my friend on it as well. And and I just sent it off and I was like, you know what? Let's see what happens. And then we got a call back. My agent got a call back saying that they want to hire me to write for the show. And I was really excited about it. So initially I was kind of skeptical, but just because I'd never done children's music before.
hmm
But I ended up loving it. It was a lot of fun.
And it's so different too, because like the PBS things, like especially with Super Y, it's like very like literacy geared, right? So like I
Mhm.
know with I've read about Sesame Street, and Sesame Street like has really specific things that they try to include and how they present the material. Was there anything similar like that for Super Y? Because it's very like you're teaching kids to read and helping kids to read.
Yes, it's very curriculum based.
hmm
So the songs that were written out, we had to basically go through the script. It was written in the script, and I had to take lyrics from that and then create the songs and
Oh,
even tweak those things as well. So, and there was a lot of back and forth between PBS Kids, Nine Story Media, and Brownback to decide like, does this work? Is the tempo too fast for the words? Because the kids have to understand this. So there was like a constant feedback loop that we had to go through in order to get things just right. So yes, it's very involved when it comes to that part because you want to make sure kids are retaining the information, that it's hooky and groovy, that they can dance to it, but also learn from it. So yeah, it's completely different from anything else I've done, you know?
it. So the songs, what I really like about Super Y and yeah, all the PBS stuff in general, like it's like an earworm, right? For kids and
Mhm.
parents, it just gets stuck in your head, and I think that's so amazing for just like helping them learn.
Good for
Did
the kids, bad for the parents.
yeah, that's true, but you know, it works out.
Yeah.
I can hear the song in my head over and over, but that's
Yeah.
good. um, so did you like okay, so how do you create an earworm? That's kind of like a hard question, maybe, but like what goes into that? Because that's not it doesn't
Uh,
just happen.
yeah, I think creating earworms, you have to have a really catchy, like rhythmic element, something that really gets your body moving. And I think the use of syncopation in
hmm
general tricks the ear enough to want to know what's coming next. So when you don't have something that's just one, two, three, four, but it's one, two, da, 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 immediately your ear is like, oh, what's going on over here? So I think it's using a combination of rhythm, but also somewhat simple motives or a simple melody on top of something interesting rhythmically. And obviously, harmony plays into it as well because that kind of shapes the feeling of the song. So I think of making something simple but catchy is the key, which is the hardest thing to do because people do this every day and it's so hard not to copy someone else. So trying to create something that's simple, hooky, and and an earworm, especially for children, is a challenge.
Now,
You know,
so you mentioned earlier that there was like a 70s like cop show uh like vibe for this. Can you talk more about that? Can you talk about like influences for this and
yeah,
any of that?
sure. I mean, I think we were very influenced by like Schoolhouse Rock,
Hmm.
that type of vibe. And so the director Jerry, I love him. He's like the Canadian Jack Black. So it was like this, collaboration of like, let's try this and maybe we should try this here and let's do a little jazzy hit here or like so it just became like this laboratory of finding the sound and Jerry really steered true to that because he has huge ties to anime. So there
Hmm.
was elements of that in some of the transition scenes when they use their powers. Very like anime driven art style in general. And so I hope that answered your
No,
question.
it totally did. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
so you mentioned the director. How, and I don't know if this was true for him, but how do you like collaborate when the person doesn't necessarily speak music? Because it's like this very specific, world that if you're like a creative director, maybe you don't know that you're like creative in other ways.
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to be so bad with this particular situation because I come from a very dominant classical music background.
Hmm.
So when I'm speaking music, it's like a second language to me, and I like sometimes assume people know it. So I think the thing that I learned the most is speaking in adjectives.
Mm.
Like people always kind of um, understand that a little more than being like, maybe we should try this instrument or this instrument, because then you run into cases where they're like, let's try the tuba there, but they really meant a cello or something.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's like, they may not know like the I mean, that's kind of absurd, but they may not know the full knowledge of the orchestra and the palette. So it's better to speak in adjectives to be able to decide what's the mood, how do we want to feel, and then from there, I can kind of figure out a collection of instruments or orchestration to kind of hone in on that feeling. And
Hmm.
then we kind of tweak it as we go.
Now, so for this, what was recording this like? Were there sample tracks? I think I read that or heard that with Batman, or was it like, in the studio recording what?
Yeah, so a part of it was recorded in the studio, and then the majority of the music production was done by myself at my computer.
Oh
So
boy.
I think the entire score and the show was all sample orchestration. So, but
Oh.
I do a lot of programming,
Hmm.
and I think my experience being a session musician on the stages, like I'm just around that sound a lot. So it's kind of easy for me to be able to tweak virtual instruments to make them sound even more realistic. Not that I want to, but sometimes you have to meet the goal, like of course you want to hire this big group and stuff, but money comes into play. And so the vocals were all recorded in Canada.
Oh.
And the actors actually recorded them. So they weren't like trained singers. And that was a stylistic choice too. We wanted to make sure that it felt like kids were singing,
Hmm.
and so there are little pitch issues here or there, but that's kind of the characteristic of kids, when they're
Yeah.
singing. And so, but yeah, we recorded all the vocals ahead of time, and then we did sampled references of the songs, and from there, those were sent to the animators.
Okay.
And then they locked that to picture, and then from there sent the final edits of of each episode, and then I scored each episode as well, as writing the songs and for each episode. So it was a very lengthy process, but
Yeah.
ended up being awesome.
Okay. So let's talk about for like an individual episode and maybe the whole thing in general. So from idea to actually having, an episode complete because there's no magic wand and it's a lot of work.
Mhm.
How long does that take? What is the process like?
Well, the first part with this company, or these companies, the first part of the process was, like I said, like developing the songs,
Hmm.
tweaking everything, recording that, and then getting that locked. And that was probably done over the course of, oh man, I don't even remember, maybe a few months or
Oh,
so, but it was a turning around like 5 episode batches,
oh,
every every 2 weeks or something, or maybe
wow.
week, or I can't remember it was fast. You had to write a lot of music in a short amount of time. So, that's creating, going from the lyrics, tweaking the lyrics to make sure they work musically, and then writing the melodies. And then from there, writing the music surrounding the
Hmm.
melodies, and then, recording vocals, etc. Um, it's not a lot of time to be able to do that. So, and I don't have, like, this team of 25 ghostwriters working with me. Like, it's a small team, but a very robust small team,
Yeah.
so we were able to handle those turnarounds, well.
What was there anything really challenging or really like satisfying that you were able to just to kind of bring to life with this?
I think the challenging aspect is working within parameters, like
Hmm.
I know in scoring we have to work within parameters of syncing, duration, hit points, things like that. But like when you have those already attached and then other things on top, like you got to make sure that every word is heard and enunciated, and like you have to make sure that it's catchy and simple, and and that the rhythm isn't too complex for the children to sing. Like these are things that you don't really run into unless you're working on a production like this. So I think those challenges were the rewarding aspects of like figuring out how to make things work with such strict guidelines.
Gotcha.
I think that's going to help me further on in my in my process of scoring.
Oh, absolutely. So, you've done a lot of animation work, but you've also done some live action stuff earlier, um, I guess in your career. Can you talk about like differences between scoring for animation versus scoring for live action?
I think animation relies heavily on the music, much more so than live action, because there's so much more you can do and take risks with animation, especially in action sequences and things like that. And there's also this like stylistic consideration of what we call like Mickey Mousing, where you're hitting every action on the screen and doing things like this. When you do that in live action, sometimes it can just be like overkill, but
Oh,
in
yeah.
animation it really works. So I feel like there are like different things you have to take into account, um, letting the live action actors drive the scene more than taking over with music. Sometimes animation, that's its job, to really like blanket it and elevate it even more. Not to say that's not the job in live action, but usually people, I don't know, I feel like people are more drawn to the human characteristic of like a person in front of me on screen talking versus an animated character.
Yeah.
That's not to poo-poo on animation, but it's just how people connect normally. So we need more elements to bring people in an animation that includes more sound design and effects, and and music, etc.
Oh, I think that's totally true. You need to
Mm.
more to be like immersive. Um,
Yeah.
so, obviously you mentioned parameters with PBS. You had a bunch of things that you kind of had to hit on with this. How is it different working on something like that versus working on Batman, where you have this huge IP history and like musical expectations with certain like Batman notes. I don't speak
Yeah.
music very well, so
It's all
uh,
good. Um, Batman is like, an intimidating IP. It's been
Mhm.
around for a long time. There's a huge fan base, both like cult and mainstream. And so people definitely have expectations when they see a Batman film. This Batman, The Doom That Came to Gotham, very different animated film, and
Oh
most
yeah.
fans will definitely agree with that because it's this dark suspense horror kind of fantasy film, and a
Hmm.
lot of people in Lovecraftian, which you don't really see a lot. So um my goal was to try to create something familiar with the harmonic language, that big orchestration, dark sound, really low lows and high highs, and like soaring horns and all that, but trying to make it also its own kind of fingerprint, because it is its own film. So I tried to steer clear of, our traditional Batman themes because I wanted something different.
Yep.
So that was the biggest thing and the challenge. I feel like I was constantly in my head about it, because in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of it, because I'm like, like Hans's score is amazing, and James Newton Howard and Danny Elfman and Shirley Walker and all these people that like created these sound worlds that still live on and on and on and on. And I'm like, how do I compete to that? And so instead of just seeing it as like a competition thing, I just put together like a playlist of all their scores and just immersed myself into it. So
Mm-hmm.
by the time it was time to write, it was like I had that backbone of Batman's sound, and then I was able to expound from that, or expand from that. Um, so yeah, it was very, very, very challenging, and not to mention the timeline and the, delivery schedule. We didn't have time to record the orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
just in this performance schedule. So besides writing an hour and 27 minutes of music, I had to program an hour and 27 music
Oh,
on
wow.
top of that, and mix and master, so
Well, it
it
turned out
was,
great.
well, thank you, thank you. But I mean, most people I talk to, they're like, "Wow, like where did you record the score?" I'm like, "My studio, like my computer." And they're like, "What?" It took a long time
Yep.
to get all of that right. And from my background, the last thing I wanted to do was put something out that sounded like a Nintendo.
Yep.
So yeah, so I think rising to the expectations of the fan base is the hardest challenge when it comes to a big IP. But you also have to accept that not everyone's going to love it, and you have to accept that people will love it too. So I'm just happy to be a part of it. For me, fairly new to the studio scene as a composer, it was an excellent way for me to be able to somewhat flex my muscles in a realm that, a lot of people don't get the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to write for. So I'm just blessed to be able to be part of the franchise.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know we're getting pretty close on time. Can you talk about what you're working on now? Are you allowed to share that, or is that
I can share a few things. I do a lot of concert music as
Mhm.
well, for chamber ensembles and also orchestra. So the past year, I guess the past 2 years, there was a commission I did for the Colburn School of Music called My Young Friend.
Okay.
It was written for Andrew Brady, who's the principal bassoonist of St. Paul Chamber Orchestra now. He was the principal of Atlanta Symphony, but I wrote that piece for bassoon and piano, which later, after him winning the job at St. Paul, he had introduced them to the piece. And so in March, I'll be flying out there for the
Oh,
premiere of St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and Andrew soloing on My Young Friend. So I'm really excited about that because St. Paul is one of the top chamber orchestras in the world. And just to be asked to write something for them is incredible. And then also a piece that I wrote called Quintet in the Key of Blue. That was commissioned by the Dubé Ensemble, and their artistic director is Joseph Conyers, who's the principal bass of the Philadelphia Orchestra. So
I'm from Philly,
they're
so that
on
makes me
tour.
happy.
Oh, cool. Awesome. You know how amazing that orchestra is then.
Yes.
The string sound. But yeah, he hit me up and was like, "Hey, we want you to write a piece for our ensemble." So they premiered that last year, but also are going to go on tour this year, at the Harris Theater in Chicago and other places around, performing that piece. There's something else that's really exciting that I
Okay.
cannot talk about yet because it hasn't been announced. But if
Ah.
you want to know, anyone who wants to know, just, check out my socials, because when I post that, it's going to be pretty awesome. And there's a few other projects that are in the works, that negotiation phase. So
Mhm.
I will keep everyone posted.
Oh, that's exciting, and I'll keep check. What are your socials so we can?
Sure. Most of them, IG, Twitter, and I think what's the other one? YouTube.
Yeah.
All of those is at Viola Nation, VIOLANATION. So dorky. I'm a violist, but I gotta represent. But yeah, if you type in Viola Nation in
You'll find it.
Google, you'll probably, yeah, you'll find everything. So,
That's awesome.
and Spotify, my name is Stefan L. Smith on there and all the other streaming platforms. So if you want to hear my music, check that out as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for taking the time to talk.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find the companion article for this podcast, along with all the other news for those who like superheroes, science fiction, and fantasy, films, TV shows, and other media at thecosmiccircus.com. Have a great day.